Hi, I'm Brian Welch. I'm the publisher of Mother Earth News, and I'm here with our friend Joel Salatin. And we just thought we'd spend a little time talking about lifestyles, farming, health, and anything that comes to mind. Joel, thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Brian. It's a delight to be with you.
Thanks very much. Yeah. I feel the same way. You know, I was thinking recently, having read your books and listened to you speak several times, that mostly explicitly you talk about farming and about ways of making it a joyful and healthy lifestyle, a sustainable lifestyle, both in the sense that it preserves its resource base, the environment, and in the sense that it's sustainable because it can support itself economically. And it occurred to me that that kind of healthy, engaged, joyful career doesn't have to take place in farming, and that in fact you're talking about a set of issues that are much larger than just agriculture. Sure. Would you say that's true?
Oh, absolutely, and it has ramifications to many sectors of life. Just finding somebody that is something that is soul satisfying, and then participating with it viscerally. You know, we just have this idea that it's demeaning to work with your hands.
Right.
And there've been some books now written on this. You know, the artisanship of craftsmanship and the healing of, well, good night. You know, even Gibbs on NCIS, you know, was building a boat in his basement.
Right.
And there's a deep therapy in working with your hands, something that you can touch, that's real, that's physical, and I think that's true in a lot of professions. And in fact, we see it in our culture in just our need for reality, our fixation maybe on reality TV, on fantasy vacations, you know, where you rock climb and you do these very physical, extreme vacations.
Right.
And I think that the human body, the human spirit is made for, you know, mechanical action
and physical engagement in the world. I remember 30 years ago, I suppose, that book Megatrends, the first one that came out, talked about high tech and high touch and how they had to balance. And the more technical our lives became, the more virtual our reality was, the more we would crave these high touch activities. And of course, rock climbing is a high touch activity, but so is your profession and my avocation of farming, isn't it? And it does satisfy a need for a physical engagement in the world, I suppose.
Yeah, it does. And at the end of the day, you don't just blink your creativity into cyberspace. You actually have something that will be there tomorrow and the next day and the next day. And you can really you can measure that progress, and you can see it. I did that. I participated in that.
Right. That fence is out there, standing straight.
Yes, that's right. That's or that tree I planted, or that wood pile that I cut and piled up, and understanding our integration with this ecological umbilical through participation, I think creates a humility toward just how grand this scheme is.
Yeah,
it's not just about me. It's just a grander, mysterious, wonderful thing, and it's great to be able to actually feel a part of that, as opposed to, you know, I'm out here and I have to get on a jet and fly somewhere to participate.
Yeah, exactly. Or having experiences that are entirely interpreted by some video game designer, or that are entirely interpreted by a hotel manager for us, or a tour organizer. There is something about activities that involve base reality, fundamental reality, life and death, real physical weather, real physical engagement, sometimes real physical danger.
Right. Well, that's one of the reasons that I'm such an advocate of gardens for children gardening.
Yeah, right.
Is because, you know, when you play, let's say, a video game, we can pick on video games.
Yeah, you and I would.
Yeah. But when you play that, you know, if your icon gets destroyed, you know, blown up or killed or whatever, you know, you wait 5 seconds, and the game gives you a new person, a new car, a new whatever, and you go on. But when you garden, when a child gardens and you have this tomato plant and you plant it, and you watch it come up and if you don't water it and it dies, you don't just wait and the fungus comes up and it's real fungus and the leaves wither and no matter no matter how you beg or desire to get better points,
Right.
the game doesn't just reward that, and you realize that, wow, this is out of my control.
Right.
And I think sometimes realizing that we just don't have the world by the tail at our fingertips
Right.
is an important lesson to learn coming into adulthood, that I just don't have this world by the tail that I can just, manipulate.
Right. Well, it occurs to me that there are two almost oppositional messages in that. One is that we can't control everything, and that our responsibilities are real. But then there's an allegorical message that since we can't control everything, we don't necessarily have to get as wound up about some aspects of life as we do. Some of it one has to let flow. Some of it is one has to let go.
That's right. That's right. Floods happen, droughts happen,
Right.
Disease happens, death happens, and when you see, the beauty of a compost pile. I mean that you take this raw stuff in that's dead, in death.
Right.
And it decomposes and
Yes.
it feeds this amazing web of life in there, and then comes out in a few months as the nurturing, the regenerative nurturing of this next cycle.
Yep.
You realize that all is not lost.
Right. Right.
And yes, even in death, there is that wonderful regenerative aspect of allowing new beings to come along.
Absolutely.
And it's just a great symphony or choreography of cycles.
How do you feel about some people's idea that we can and should dramatically lengthen human lives? You've got people saying that in the next 2 decades we're going to have 150-year lifespans and 200-year lifespans. Do you have a reaction to that?
Well, my reaction is that we've prophesied a lot of idiocy many times.
Yes, sir.
We thought that that DDT would eradicate all sorts of tropical diseases. We thought that that our cleverness, we thought that concentrated animal feeding operations would solve the world's food problems.
Sure.
And now what we have are Listeria, Campylobacter, MRSA, C. diff.
Right.
Nature
has a way to filling in the gaps.
Yeah, and I think that too often, I think that this is coming to nature with a headiness.
Yes, right. That arrogance.
That arrogance, that nature has a balance sheet too.
Yeah. The other thing, the reason I brought it up, though, was I was thinking about what you said about the responsibility that one feels watching the cycle, or the release that one feels in being part of the cycle.
Sure.
It, for me, has certainly profoundly made me feel a profound responsibility to eventually pass.
Yes.
If I were offered immortality, I would not take it. I feel fairly confident about that. Mm-hmm. That I don't want this particular ego, to last forever.
Right.
That I want to get back into that energy field and let myself be passed down, as so many other creatures have died and been passed down for me.
Sure.
Make room for new people. Make
Absolutely.
room for new creatures, other creatures. I just think it's a fundamental responsibility that we don't often talk about.
Oh, I agree, and the whole idea of the recycling, whether it's recycling opportunity,
Yes.
recycling physical matter, recycling energy,
Right.
That cycle is real, and to think that we're going to be clever enough to change such a fundamental cycle is I think fundamentally arrogant, and I actually don't think it's a noble goal.
No, I don't
sure
find
it's a
it doesn't
noble
sound even desirable to me.
I mean,
personally.
I find it fascinating that people would be talking like that at a time when, in the last 10 years, autism has jumped from 1 in 1,000 to 1 in 90 in 10 years.
Yeah.
Is that GMOs? Is it, what is it? And I mean, there are plenty of theories floating around out there, but it's kind of like one of the reasons that I don't get totally enamored of space exploration.
Yeah.
Now, I think it's fascinating that we walked on the moon, and I'm fascinated by it. But I'm saying, do we really want to colonize Mars before we've learned how to colonize the Earth correctly?
Yes, right. Yes.
Do we really want to live to 150 years when we're seeing childhood obesity, type 2 diabetes, and autism just exponentially escalating? Why don't we get our kids healthy before we try to tap on another 50 years?
That's a great point. I never thought of it that way. It's a great point. There was
we so seldom attack the weak link, though. We're as for some reason in our human psyche, we're always wooed
right
by the big and the grand
right
out there. That's in many cases not the weak link of our time.
True. Something that is probably unachievable panacea that we reach out for, while some perfectly practical and practical solutions in very close proximity we're ignoring.
Absolutely. Look at the promises of GMOs right now. I mean, they're the same promises of the Green Revolution.
Sure.
That we're going to just do all this, and the fact is that if we had a Manhattan Project for compost,
yeah, I know.
we would have absolutely fed the world, without three-legged salamanders, infertile frogs in a dead zone the size of New Jersey and the Gulf of Mexico.
Yeah, for sure.
And so we've learned how to plant corn, GMO corn in driverless tractors with little robot GPS,
Yep.
to within a foot perfection in a field, and we aren't asking, should we really plant corn? Should we actually have, pasture-based cows, for example?
Right.
And so it's just amazing to me how many times we run off solving the non-weak link.
Yes. Well, careers are built on the movement. I mean, big careers in most fields of endeavor today are built on the movement of large bodies of resource, which means they always come in great big box packages. They come in giant packages. And small-scale solutions on which you can't build an academic career or a government career or a corporate career don't attract the same resources, unfortunately. But we might in the future.
Right. Louis Bromfield, who of course is one of my great icons, who wrote those great books back in the 50s, he talked at the time about they were building, the Army Corps of Engineers was building all these great big dams on the Mississippi for flood control.
Right.
He said, that's too far down the channel. He said the answer to flood control on the Mississippi is, number one, getting organic matter up.
Right.
Which chemical fertilizer, of course, depletes the organic matter and tillage. And number two is we need to build millions of little farm ponds all up in the upper reaches, up in the highlands, to catch the water before the volume and the velocity gets so rapid down here on the Mississippi. And if our organic matter were still at 4%, we could hold 300% more water than we do.
Yep.
And if we had a lot of farm ponds up in high ground, like big cow footprints, on the landscape, we would hold all this water up there so that it wouldn't get to the Mississippi. But yeah, you're right. We love big, don't we? We love big solutions, and people talk about that to me. You talk about this, domestic culinary skills and home gardens and localized food systems, edible landscapes, and they poo-poo this as it can't really feed the world. But as recently as just 1946, half of all the U.S. vegetable production occurred in backyard gardens.
Right.
Today we have 36 million acres in lawn.
Yep.
and 35 million acres housing and feeding recreational horses.
Right.
71 million acres. John Jevons, the guru of biointensive, he says that that's plenty of ground to feed the entire country without a single farm.
Makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a lot of territory.
Yeah, but you know, watching 10 staggered $300,000 combines going through a Kansas wheat field, that gets the blood pumping. You know, that's,
Well, it used to. I mean, it certainly has historically. I'm not going to jump to the conclusion that we're always going to be so attracted to the big institution. I'm optimistic that there is a growing awareness of the wisdom of small-scale strategies and
Sure.
intimate
Sure.
knowledge of the environment down
the
to
cumulative effect of a lot of little things. done
Exactly.
correctly. Absolutely.
I
yeah.
think there's a growing awareness of the power
Buckminster
of that.
Fuller would love this part of our conversation.
Yeah, and
Small
he
is
might like
beautiful.
being alive now. I mean, he might
Yes.
like seeing some of the trends that are taking place.
Absolutely.
I really do think there's a growing awareness of these things. You know, I don't want to fail to mention your new book, which is called
Fields of Farmers.
Fields of Farmers, and a particular part of it, very early in the book, where you just talk passingly about the joy of sharing an intuitive celebration or an intuitive sense of celebration with many, many, many different living things in the course of a day. You and I both raise livestock.
yes.
And I'd never heard anybody say that before. But it's such a deep sense of satisfaction for me.
Right.
And it gave me a great, it felt great to hear you echoing the thing I've felt so many times.
Sure.
It's an empathetic business, isn't it?
It is indeed. I liken it to how many people have the privilege of being able to go out every day and make so many beings happy. You know, touch so many beings with what I call ecological caress.
Yes.
And that is a deeply fulfilling. I mean, I get kind of break down when it's that deeply fulfilling.
Yeah.
I count it a great privilege. I'm, you know, I feel sad. I feel sad for people that just all see concrete all day, metal, you know, and aren't able to see how lovingly the earth gives back
Right.
to a little bit of love on our part.
Well, and how universal that the love is, that creation sort of rains down on the
Yes.
planet, and all the different ways that the planet's abundance is celebrated by
Yeah.
different creatures.
Exactly.
And I just feel like farming brings me into intimate connection to that joy and that miracle every day. It's one of the best things about it.
You know, so many times I get this sense that they think that the earth is a kind of unwilling partner. You know?
Right. That we're battling
Yes,
for
that
its
we're
resources.
we have to take, we have to make the soil give us this. We have to take this, and as an unwilling partner, could I say an unwilling lover? You know.
Sure.
But rather, the earth is this benevolent lover. You know, that just wants to give and give. I mean, the fact that a plant is 95% sunlight.
Right.
Goodness, you know, that's something that just is as mysterious and esoteric as sunlight. You know, you can't touch it, you can't move it, you can't grab it, and yet here through photosynthesis, it makes something that you can weigh on a scale, you can touch, you can feel, and 95% of it is just a gift of sunlight. That's abundance. That's just a blessing of abundance.
And the fact that the creative machine then fills every little nook and cranny in the creation with living things ideally suited
Sure.
to occupy that tiny niche, that at that temperature with those minerals available in myriad variety. Just an astonishing, I mean, it's anyway, touching that in an intimate way is for me the most profound sacrament that I experience in life, is the witnessing
Right.
of that great abundance, that great variety, the astonishing splendor of creation.
Right. Yeah. And this is what creates essentially when the life, whether it's the plant or the animal or whatever, as they go through this, life, death, decomposition, regeneration cycle, it as you participate in that, you begin to realize how sacred that is, and that actually the cycle of life revolves around this sacrificial benevolence, if you will.
Sure.
Whether it's the plants that are decaying in the compost pile, feeding the microorganisms that then metabolize the nitrogen, the potassium, and the phosphorus, into the minerals that the little azotobacter and gibberellins are going to take into the rootlets and come. It's just a magnificent circle that creates a sacred place of just sacrifice and regeneration, and you
Right.
realize. Real life in our lives happens as we give to each other, as we.
Yes.
That's what love is, And wow, this is profound, and it's big, and I'm embedded in it, and it's cool.
And we're involved in that kind of intimate, long-term relationship, ideally a loving relationship, with a particular piece of earth, aren't we, as farmers?
Yes.
It is that kind of physically intimate relationship with a piece of land.
It is. You walk it, your shoes step on it, and you, Wendell Berry talks about the place,
Right,
and
sense of
Wes
place.
Jackson does
Of
too.
Of course, yes.
A sense of place, and he says, that you can't farm well unless you know well, and you can't know but so much land well.
Yeah.
And that's just a beautiful writing, and he's exactly right.
What are your ambitions for the rest of what's your mission today? What might it be 10 years from now? Do you think out that way? Do you set goals for yourself? Yeah. Are there subjects that you haven't tackled as a philosopher and a writer yet that you want to get into?
Yes, there are. In fact, I have about 8 more titles dancing around in my head right now for books, and this last one was number 9. I've found that for me, about 1 book every 2 years is about as fast a pace as I can handle. Yeah. I have a fiction title that I would love to do a fiction book, because you can do some things with fiction that you can't do otherwise. To try to, Gene Logsdon has done some fiction.
I know.
Now too, and it's good. It's good, and you can explore topics because you have a little more license. It doesn't
Sure.
have to be all factual. So I want to explore some of the industrial food, some of the mental anguish, I think, and some of the thinking. A little bit like John Grisham explores legal issues in some of his books.
The psychological damage
that a layman might not normally think about. He just introduces you to some ideas of civil liberty and
sure.
and the Fourth Amendment and search warrants and things like that. And I want to explore some of the like in this fiction that I'm thinking about. I've kind of got a plot in mind. I like to explore the philosophical gymnastics that the industrial food system goes through. I'll have my characters and stuff, but I want to explore the kind of thinking that goes on in their minds to arrive to do and conceive of the kind of mechanistic view they have toward biology.
And maybe out some wrong assumptions
exactly.
that live on in industrial society without question.
Right,
yeah.
Exactly. And so,
That's exciting.
I've got some of that in mind, but there's definitely I've got to do a marketing book at some point.
Sure.
I'm looking at a title. Maybe it'll be the next one. I don't know, but one dealing with the Judeo-Christian environmental ethic. So often the religious right has the reputation, rightly so, of pillaging, and I want to take. And there are theologians who have written about this, but they're very theological, academic minded. And I want to basically, my working title is Caressing Creation's Choreography, and basically take it from a dirt under the fingernails farmer standpoint of what does a forgiveness farm look like? What does it look like to have a forgiving food system? Well, obviously it's one that doesn't require a lot of antibiotics, you know.
Yeah, yeah.
You go down those paths.
It's very interesting that you bring that up, and I may edit this part out, but the book that I'm presently laboring over and trying to write, I've been calling Heroic Compassion.
Oh, that's a great title.
Because I see us at this point in human history where we're really coming to grips with our long-term responsibilities for
Yes.
preserving the habitat
Right.
and the splendor of creation. And I see in the Christian faith a really perfect model, much to my surprise actually. You know, when Jesus was voluntarily mortal, did surrender himself for a higher cause, and said when he did it, "This is my body, which is given for you. This is my blood, which is given for you, and every time you eat or drink, think of me." And you know, I always, personally, I think I never quite grasped the idea of that person having died for our sins until it occurred to me that accepting mortality and limitation and the recycling of ourselves as part of that creation is in fact the embodiment of grace. And in a way, the acceptance of that sacrifice is the absolution of sin in a kind of real and physical way. And so I'm excited about some of the same things it sounds like that you're excited about.
Yes.
now.
On our website, we say that we're in the land redemption business.
Yes, right.
And so we feel very strongly that part of our stewardship mandate as stewards is to actually heal the landscape, to make it less susceptible to flooding. How does that look? To make it less susceptible to drought. What does that look like? To make a food system that's more resilient to shocks. What does that look like?
To give creation its highest potential,
Yes.
where we have stewardship,
Yes.
rather than minimizing the damage we do, to really aim for giving the natural creation there its highest potential. And we have the capacity for that if we study it.
Absolutely, and the whole thing about, you know, I talk about the pigness of the pig, you know, and people laugh, but absolutely, it is how we respect and honor the least of these that creates an ethical framework on which we honor and respect, you know, the Brianness of Brian or the, you know, Emily-ness of Emily, and a society that you use a pig as just so many inanimate piles of protoplasmic structure.
Right.
Will quickly view its citizens with the same kind of manipulative design.
In fact, reflects that value system back on its practitioners.
Yes, exactly. And so I see food, the whole foodscape, if I could just broaden it all the way out, not just the farm, but the farm and the processing and the family dining table, the whole foodscape. I see that as how a culture views its whole, you know, its whole ecology ethic, its life ethic, its relational ethic is all reflected in, well, what does it mean when you sit down and you have this sustenance in front of you that lived and now is getting ready to give its life for you. You're communing now on this living, now dead, that's going to give you life. That's why he says, think of me every time you do this.
This has been a fascinating conversation. I hope we'll have some more conversations like this in the future. Thanks so much for taking the time.
Thank you, Brian. It's been my pleasure. Thank you.